And a lot of people wonder about $1 trillion here and $100 billion there. What does it all mean? It means a lot. And what it means is that if this horrific Republican budget is implemented, what it will mean is enormous amount of pain for tens and tens of millions of working class and middle class and lower income people in this country. That's what this budget means. Mr. President, after failing to pass a so-called health care bill that would throw up to 32 million Americans off of the health insurance they currently have, a bill that was widely opposed by the American people, Donald Trump and the Republican leadership are back again. While I totally disagree with what they are trying to do, I do appreciate their temerity. They're not giving up in terms of trying to protect the interest of the billionaire class against the vast majority of the American people. Mr. President, the Republicans are now pushing one of the most destructive and unfair budget and tax proposals in the modern history of the United States, a plan that would do incalculable harm to tens of millions of working families, our children, the sick, the elderly, and the poor. The Republican budget that we are debating on the floor of the Senate this week is the Robin Hood principle in reverse. Robin Hood took from the rich and gave to the poor. What this budget does is take from working people, the middle class, the elderly, and the poor to give massive tax breaks to people who are already living in incredible opulence. Donald Trump and the Republican leadership claims that their plan would provide a quote-unquote big league tax cut for the middle class. Nothing could be further from the truth. According to the Tax Policy Center, by the end of this decade, nearly 80%, underlined 80%, of the tax benefits of the Republican plan would go to the top 1%. Even more incredibly, the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1%, would receive some 40% of the tax breaks over a 10-year period. A tax proposal which gives 80% of the benefits to the top 1%, 40% of the benefits to the top 1/10 of 1%, is not a tax proposal benefiting the middle class or working families of this country. It is a tax proposal designed to benefit the wealthiest people and the campaign contributors of the billionaire class. Mr. President, this budget cuts Medicaid by more than $1 trillion over a 10-year period. Now, that's kind of strange. The United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people. What the American people want, in my view, is to join the rest of the world and understand that health care is a right, that we should not have 28 million people without any health insurance and even more underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments. Yet what this budget does, unbelievably, is to throw 15 million people off of the health insurance they have with a $1 trillion cut in Medicaid. And I would hope that my friend, and he is my friend, the chairman of the Budget Committee, might at some point during this long debate tell us what happens to somebody today who is struggling with cancer, with heart disease, with diabetes, with a life-threatening illness, who suddenly loses the Medicaid health insurance that they have? What happens to that person? I would hope that some of my Republican friends would tell the American people what happens, because study after study tells us what will happen, and that is thousands of people will lose their lives. They will die because they will no longer have access to the health insurance they had. Further, Mr. President, this budget does what Republicans have not yet attempted to do during the past year in their so-called health care legislation, and that is to make a $473 billion cut to Medicare. So it's not only a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, it is a $473 billion cut to Medicare. Now, interestingly enough, I think many Americans will recall that during his campaign for president, Donald Trump told the American people that he would not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He said that over and over again. On April 18th, 2015, this is just one quote of many, Mr. Trump said, and I quote, "Every Republican wants to do a big number on Social Security. They want to do it on Medicare. They want to do it on Medicaid. And we can't do that. And it's not fair to the people that have been paying in for years, and now all of a sudden they want to be cut." End of quote. That is Donald Trump running for president. Well, I would say to President Trump, that's what you told the American people during your campaign. Now I hope you will tell your Republican friends right here in the Senate that they should respect the campaign promises you ran on, and that if they pass a budget that cuts Medicare or Medicaid, that you will veto that legislation. I hope the president has the integrity to do that. I don't think he will, but I would hope that he does that. Mr. President, poll after poll after poll tells us that the overwhelming majority of the American people do not want Congress to cut Medicare or Medicaid. In fact, I think in this country today, if you ask people what their deepest concern is, they're concerned about jobs, they're concerned about income. I think even more so, they are concerned about the health care they have, how much it costs, whether they're going to have it tomorrow. And poll after poll tells us the American people do not want Congress to cut Medicare, which, by the way, is the most popular health insurance program in this country. And they don't want to see Medicaid cut as well, because they know, among other things, that about 2/3 of nursing home dollars comes from Medicaid. So if you have a mom or a dad dealing with Alzheimer's or some other terrible illness in a nursing home and massive cuts to Medicaid are made, what is going to happen to your parent in a nursing home? People know that. They do not want to cut Medicare and Medicaid. A recent Pew Foundation poll finds that 85% of Republicans and 94% of Democrats want to either maintain or increase funding for Medicare. 60% of Americans oppose slashing Medicaid, according to a recent Quinnipiac poll. A recent Wall Street Journal NBC poll finds that only 12% of the American people believe that the wealthy should receive a tax cut, while 62% believe that the wealthiest people in our country should pay more in taxes. So what you have is the American people saying, don't cut Medicare, don't cut Medicaid, don't give tax breaks to billionaires. In fact, ask them to pay more in taxes. That, by and large, is where the American people are coming from, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents. So then the question arises, why is the Republican leadership bringing forward a budget that does the exact opposite of what the American people want. And the answer to that question, I am sorry to say, is not complicated. It has everything to do with a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires and the wealthiest people in this country to exert their influence over the political process. That increasingly, it is not the ordinary American, the middle-class worker, that the Congress listens to, but it is wealthy campaign contributors. Today, we have a corrupt campaign finance system that enables multi-billionaires, along with some of the most powerful CEOs in America, to contribute many hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process. Many of us believe that the concept of democracy is one person, one vote. You get a vote, you get a vote, I get a vote. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Majority wins. That's what we teach the children in the 5th grade and the 6th grade. One person, one vote, majority wins. But unfortunately, as a result of the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the American campaign finance system has been totally corrupted, and we now have a situation where billionaire families can spend unlimited sums of money to help elect candidates who protect their interest. And not only can they spend that money, that is exactly what they are doing. Mr. President, there was a very interesting article in the Boston Globe just the other day, October 14th. And this is what the article says. Headline: The Koch brothers and their friends want President Trump's tax cut very badly. And this is what the article says. The message from the billionaire, and I should say a word about the Koch brothers. Not everybody knows who they are. Koch brothers are the second wealthiest family in America. They're struggling to catch up to the Waltons, not quite there yet. They're only worth $90 billion. Struggling, but they're getting by. Happy to tell you. And with that $90 billion, what they are doing, along with a few of their friends, is spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every campaign cycle to elect people, in this case Republicans, who support their agenda. And this is what the article says. The message from the billionaire-led Koch network of donors to President Trump and the Republican Congress it helped to shape couldn't be more clear. Pass a tax overhaul or else. As the donors mixed and mingled for a policy summit at the St. Regis Hotel in Midtown Manhattan last week, just a block south from Trump Tower, it came up again and again and again. Quote, "It's the most significant federal effort we've ever taken on," end quote, said Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity, a Koch-aligned group with offices in 36 states. Quote, "The stakes for the Republicans, I've never seen them this high," end of quote. Many in the Koch network, a vast group of libertarian-leaning nonprofits and advocacy and political organizations, described the upcoming legislative push for a tax overhaul as an inflection point in modern political history, a do-or-die moment that would define whether their efforts over the years will pay off or not. The network leaders plan to dedicate much of their 2-year, $400 million politics and policy budget to the effort, though they wouldn't give an exact number. $400 million in the next 2 years to pass this piece of legislation. And this comes from a family, the Koch brothers, who are pretty upfront about what they believe. They do not want to cut Social Security or Medicare and Medicaid. They'll take that, but that's really not their goal. They want to eliminate Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and virtually every other federal program that provides help to the working families of this country. And oh, by the way, just in passing, if the estate tax, which is part of the Republican budget, is repealed, just in passing, we might want to mention that the Koch brothers family would see a benefit of some $30 billion. So if your family is going to get a $30 billion benefit, putting a few $100 million into seeing that legislation passed is not a difficult idea. Mr. President, this budget makes it clear who the Republicans in Congress are listening to, and it is not the middle class of working families who do not want to see Medicare cut or Medicaid cut, and who certainly do not want to see a $1.9 trillion tax break to the top 1%. I am afraid that my Republican colleagues are listening to their top campaign contributors who have told the Republican Party in no uncertain terms that if they do not get their tax cuts, they will stop providing Republicans with hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign contribution. Now, how sad is that? You think about the incredibly brave Americans who have fought for democracy over the years, some of whom never returned from the battlefields, to fight for an American democracy that makes us a country where people rule. Abraham Lincoln reminded us, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Not a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. And let's be clear about something else. The entire economic theory that Senate Republicans and President Trump have embraced with this budget is called trickle-down economics. That's what it is. You give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations, benefits trickle down, and they improve the economy. This whole theory is a fraud and has been, when it applied, an abysmal failure. Since Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush slashed taxes on the wealthy and deregulated Wall Street, trillions of dollars in wealth have been redistributed from the middle class and working families to a handful of millionaires and billionaires. Today, Mr. President, we have more wealth and income inequality than at any time since the 1920s. Today, the top 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. This budget would make a bad situation even worse by widening that gap with its trillions of cuts to social programs and gifts to the top 1%. Republican budget we are debating today would make horrific cuts to the needs of working families. And let me just give you a few examples. This budget would give the wealthiest family in America, the Walton family of Walmart, a tax cut of up to $52 billion. Does anybody in their right mind think that the wealthiest family in this country needs a tax break of up to $52 billion? And they do that by repealing the estate tax. At the same time, however, if you are a low-income senior citizen, and we have too many of them in the state of Vermont trying to figure out how to keep warm in a cold winter, you and 700,000 other senior citizens and families might not be able to keep your home warm in the winter because of a cut of about $4 billion to the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. This budget says that if you are the second wealthiest family in America, the Koch brothers, your family will see a tax rate of up to $33 billion. But if you are a working-class kid right now in high school in Vermont or in Texas or in Wyoming, and you're scratching your head as to how you can afford to go to college, and in your computations you're looking at what a Pell Grant might mean to you, this budget would cut over $100 billion in Pell Grants and other financial assistance programs. This budget gives members of the Trump family a tax cut of up to $4 billion, But if you are a low-income pregnant woman, you and over 1 million other moms, new moms, babies and toddlers may not be able to get the nutrition you need thanks to a $6.5 billion cut to the Women, Infants, and Children's, the so-called WIC program. At a time when millions of working-class families all across this country are paying 40 or 50% or more for the housing that they need, this budget eliminates housing assistance for more than 1 million families due to a cut of about $37 billion to the Section 8 rental assistance program and other housing programs. At a time when the cost of child care has skyrocketed, a very serious problem in my state, Republican budget eliminates Head Start services for 25,000 children each and every year by cutting this program by some $3 billion. In total, the Republican budget would cut more than $5 trillion from education, health care, affordable housing, child care, transportation, and other programs that working people desperately need over the next decade. What is alarming is that despite this incredible giveaway for the billionaire class, the Koch brothers and their network say that it's not enough. They want more. And let us be very clear that their eventual goal, not today, not tomorrow, but their eventual goal is to see that programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are completely eliminated. Mr. President, let me conclude by saying this. This budget is not a budget for the people of Texas. It is not a budget for the people of Vermont or the people of Wyoming or the people of the United States of America. This is a budget for the billionaire class, which today is already doing phenomenally well. This is a budget for campaign contributors whose greed has no end, who provide millions and millions of dollars to candidates who represent their interest. This is a budget that must be opposed by the American people, and I urge the American people to tell their members of the Senate to vote no on this budget. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.